The door slammed shut behind him, with a sound like a coffin lid closing. 11-year-old Caleb Mercer stood on the warped wooden porch of the only house he had ever called home. His small hand still raised in the air, where the door had been a moment before. The wind from the closing slammed dust into his face. He didn't move. He couldn't. His feet had grown roots into the splintered boards, and his lungs had forgotten how to take in air. Inside the house, his stepfather was still shouting. The voice came through the thin walls like a hammer striking tin. "And don't you come back, you hear me? Don't you ever come back." Caleb heard the crash of a bottle against the wall. He heard the heavy boots stomping. He heard the silence that followed, which was somehow worse than the shouting. Out here on the porch with the late October sun sinking behind the Kentucky ridges, the boy felt the cold air bite through his thin flannel shirt and crawl down into his bones. In his right hand, he gripped the only thing he had taken with him, an old garden hoe. The wooden handle was darkened from decades of sweat and rain, smooth as riverstone, worn down to fit a man's palm. The iron blade was nicked and scratched, but still sharp enough to bite earth. On the back of the handle, just below the grip, 2 letters had been carved a long time ago, TH. The grooves of those letters were so deep they looked like scars. Caleb didn't know what those letters meant. He only knew the hoe had been his mother's. She had kept it leaning in the corner of her bedroom for as long as he could remember. When she died last winter, when the cancer finally took her at 35 years old, he had moved the hoe to his own room. It was the only thing of hers his stepfather had not sold or burned or given away. He had grabbed it on instinct when the man had thrown him out. Some part of him had known, even in that storm of fear and tears, that this hoe was the last piece of her left in the world. He took one step off the porch, then another. Then the gravel of the driveway crunched under his shoes, and he was walking. He did not look back. The dirt road that led away from the Tanner property cut through the bottom of a wide green valley. On both sides, the hills rose up steep and dark, covered in oaks and hickories that were just beginning to turn the color of fire. A creek ran somewhere off to the right, hidden in the brush, and Caleb could hear it muttering over rocks. The sky above was the color of an old bruise. Purple at the edges, yellow in the middle, with one long bright streak of orange where the sun was bleeding out behind the ridge. He walked. For the first half mile, he did not think about anything. His mind had gone white like a piece of paper that had been bleached clean. His feet moved on their own. The hoe banged softly against his shoulder with every step. The pain in his stomach, the hunger he had been ignoring all afternoon, started to wake up and stretch. He had not eaten since yesterday morning, maybe earlier. Wade Tanner had a way of forgetting that boys needed to eat. He had a way of forgetting a lot of things, especially when the bottle was in his hand. And the bottle had been in his hand most days now, since Sarah died. Caleb had learned to make himself small. He had learned to fix himself a piece of toast quietly in the kitchen at dawn, before his stepfather woke up. He had learned to chew without making sound. He had learned to disappear into the back of his closet on the nights when the shouting started. But yesterday morning, the bread had been gone. The cabinet was empty. The refrigerator held nothing but a jar of pickles and a half-empty bottle of beer. Caleb had walked the 2 miles to the gas station with the change he had saved from collecting cans, and he had bought himself a pack of crackers. That was the last thing he had eaten. This morning, when his stepfather had finally roared awake at noon, the man had been in a worse mood than Caleb had ever seen. Something about money. Something about the bank. Something about a woman named Marlene who had called and asked questions Wade did not want asked. The boy did not understand half of it. He had only understood that he was in the way. "You're costing me," the man had snarled, looming in the kitchen doorway with his red eyes and his 3 days of beard. "You hear me, boy? You're costing me more than you're worth." And then hours later, after a fresh bottle and a phone call that ended in cursing, Wade had come into Caleb's room with a strange flat look on his face. He had said, "Get out." Just like that. Get out. Caleb had thought he was joking. Then he had seen that the man was not joking, and he had asked where he should go, and Wade had laughed. Laughed like the question itself was the funniest thing he had heard in a year. Then he had picked Caleb up by the back of his shirt and walked him to the front door and thrown him onto the porch. The hoe had been in the corner of his room. Caleb had run back, snatched it, and made it out the door before it slammed. Now the boy walked, and the memory of his mother walked beside him. She had been a small woman, quiet. Her hair had been the color of corn silk, and her hands had always smelled like the lavender soap she made herself. She used to sing to him at night songs he did not know the words to, old hymns from a church she never took him to. Sometimes when she thought he was already asleep, she would sit on the edge of his bed and look at the wall and cry without making any sound at all. He had pretended to sleep on those nights. He had not known what to say. She had loved him. He knew that the way he knew the sun rose in the east. She had loved him more than anything in the world, and she had told him so every single day, even when she was so sick she could barely lift her head off the pillow. The last words she ever said to him, 3 days before she died, had been a whisper. "You remember who you are," she had said. "You remember whose blood is in you. You're a good boy, Caleb. Don't you ever let anyone tell you different." He had not understood what she meant. He had only known that his mother was dying. He had held her hand until the nurse came and made him leave, and the next morning the bed had been empty. And 3 days after that, they had buried her in the cemetery behind the small white church on the edge of town. Wade had not cried at the funeral. He had stood at the back with his hands in his pockets and watched the dirt fall. Caleb had never seen a man cry less for a wife than that. The boy walked. After what might have been an hour, the road bent sharply to the right and started to climb. The trees thickened. The creak grew louder. Caleb's legs began to ache, the kind of deep ache that goes past the muscle and into the bone, and he stopped to rest on a flat rock by the side of the road. He set the hoe down beside him. He looked at the sky. The orange streak was almost gone. The valley was filling up with shadow, like water filling a cup. In maybe an hour it would be full dark, and he had no flashlight, no jacket, no idea where he was going. He had only one plan, and it was barely a plan at all. Knock on a door. Ask for a piece of bread. Offer to work for it. He had heard once somewhere that this was something boys did in the old days. Travelers and orphans. They knocked on farmhouse doors and offered to chop wood for supper. He did not know if anyone still did that, but he knew how to use a hoe. He had been working in the small kitchen garden behind his mother's house since he was 6 years old. He could clear a row of weeds faster than most grown men. It was the only thing he had. It would have to be enough. He pushed himself up off the rock and kept walking. The first farmhouse appeared about 20 minutes later, set back from the road behind a lopsided barbed wire fence. It was a low ranch house with peeling green paint and a dog chained to a tree out front. The dog started barking when Caleb came up the drive, deep and threatening, lunging against the chain. The boy stopped at the edge of the property. He waited. After a long minute, the front door opened. A man stood there in a dirty tank top holding a cigarette. He looked Caleb up and down with eyes that were already deciding no. "What do you want?" It wasn't a question. It was a warning. Caleb's throat went dry. He gripped the hoe tighter. "Sir," he said, and his voice came out smaller than he had wanted, "Sir. I was wondering if I could do some work for you in exchange for a piece of bread." I can hoe a garden. I can chop wood if you got a hatchet small enough. I don't need much, just something to eat." The man stared at him for a long moment. The dog kept barking. The man took a long drag of his cigarette and blew the smoke out his nose. "We don't take in strays," he said. Then he closed the door. Caleb stood there on the gravel. The dog snarled and pulled at the chain. After a while, the boy turned around and walked back to the road. He did not let himself cry. Crying took energy he did not have. The second farmhouse was further down the road almost a full mile, and by the time he reached it, the sun was gone, and the valley was the color of slate. This place was bigger. A real working farm with a white painted house and a red barn and a tractor parked beside a silo. Lights were on in the kitchen window. Smoke rose from a chimney. It looked from the road like a picture from a calendar. Caleb walked up the long drive with the hoe on his shoulder. His stomach had stopped hurting. It had moved past pain into a strange, empty hum. A woman answered the door this time. She was middle-aged in an apron, and she smelled like cornbread. For a moment, when she saw him standing there, Caleb thought it was going to be all right. Her face softened. She opened her mouth. Then a man's voice called out from inside the house. "Who is it?" The woman's face changed. She glanced over her shoulder. "Just a boy," she called back. "Selling something." She turned back to Caleb, and her eyes were apologetic and afraid at the same time. She mouthed the word sorry. Then she shut the door gently, and Caleb heard the lock click. He stood on her porch in the dusk, holding his hoe, and he understood. This world he was walking through, this world of porches and locked doors, did not belong to people like him. It belonged to people who had a place to be. He was a boy who had no place. He was the kind of boy you closed the door on gently, with an apology you did not say out loud. He walked back down the drive. The road ahead was almost dark now. The first stars were coming out sharp little pinpricks above the ridge. The wind had a bite to it, the kind of bite that promised frost by morning. Caleb's hands had gone numb around the hoe. His legs were trembling. He did not know how much further he could go. He thought about lying down in the ditch and going to sleep. He thought about his mother. He kept walking. Some long time after the second farm, when he was beginning to seriously think his legs would not carry him another step, he saw it. A small light far off the road glowing yellow against the black trees. A house. A small one. He turned off the main road onto a narrow dirt lane lined with old fence posts, and he walked toward the light. The lane curved through a stand of cottonwoods. Then the trees opened up and he saw the place. It was nothing much. A small 2-story farmhouse, white paint gone gray with age. A porch sagging on one corner. A chicken coop off to the side, and beyond that a small wooden barn, with a milk cow standing in front of it, chewing in the gloom. There was a vegetable garden along the south wall of the house, half cleared for winter. A single window glowed on the ground floor, the warm yellow of an oil lamp or a kitchen bulb. A thin line of smoke came out of the chimney. It was a place that looked, Caleb thought, like the kind of place his mother would have lived in if she could have chosen. He stopped at the wooden gate. He stood there for a long time. He had been turned away twice already tonight. He did not think his heart could take a third no. But behind him was the road and the cold and nothing. And in front of him was a window with a light in it. He took a breath. He pushed the gate open. He walked up to the porch. He raised his hand to knock, and the door opened first. A woman was standing there. She was older, maybe 70. Her hair was white, and pulled back into a tight bun, and her face was the kind of face that had spent its life in the sun and the wind. Lines around her eyes, a jaw set hard. She wore a long gray dress and an apron, and in her hands she held a shotgun. The barrel was not pointed at him, but it was not pointed away from him either. It was held the way a person holds a thing they have used before. Caleb went still. The woman looked at him. Her eyes were the cold blue of a winter creek. She looked him up and down, the dirt on his shoes, the tear in his shirt where Wade had grabbed him, the way his whole body was shaking from the cold, the hoe on his shoulder. Her eyes moved to the hoe and stopped. For a moment, nothing happened. The wind moved through the cottonwoods. A chicken scratched somewhere in the side yard. The boy and the woman stood there looking at each other in the spilled yellow light from the open door. Caleb finally found his voice. It came out cracked and quiet, smaller than the wind. "Ma'am," he said, "could I hoe your garden in exchange for a piece of bread?" She did not answer. Her eyes were still on the hoe, specifically on the back of the handle where the two letters had been carved long ago. TH. Caleb saw her looking. He saw something happen in her face that he did not understand. Her jaw, which had been set so hard, went slack. Her mouth opened a little. The blue of her eyes seemed to go strange and far away, like she was looking through him to something else, something a long way off. Then her hands started to shake. The shotgun, which had been so steady, began to tremble in her grip. She tried to hold it. She could not. The barrel dipped and her fingers went loose and the heavy gun slid out of her hands and hit the wooden porch with a thud that sounded enormous in the quiet. Caleb flinched. He thought it might go off. It didn't. It just lay there at her feet like a thing she had forgotten the name of. The woman did not look down at it. She was still looking at the hoe. Her eyes were filling up with water slowly, the way a glass fills under a slow tap. Where she said, and her voice was a whisper that was barely a voice at all, "Where did you get that?" Caleb did not understand the question. "Get what?" "That," she said. "The hoe." "It was my mother's," he said. Something in her face broke. It did not break loud. It broke quiet. A tightening at the corner of her mouth, a flicker in her eyes. A small sound in her throat that was not quite a word, and not quite a sob. She put one hand against the doorframe to steady herself. The other hand went to her chest over her heart, and pressed there hard, like she was trying to hold something inside her ribs that wanted to come out. Caleb stood frozen on the porch. He did not know what was happening. He had only asked a question. He had only wanted a piece of bread. The old woman closed her eyes. She took a long breath. He watched her shoulders rise and fall, like she was counting the way people count when they are trying to keep themselves from drowning. When she opened her eyes again, the strange, faraway look was gone. And what was there instead was something steady and grave and terribly sad. She looked at him, really looked at him this time, not at the hoe, at his face. Her eyes went over him slowly. The shape of his cheekbones, the line of his jaw, the color of his hair under the porch light, the way his mouth turned down at the corners when he was tired. She made that sound again, the small one, the one that was not quite a word. Then she said, "Come inside." Caleb did not move. He did not understand. "Ma'am," he said, "I can work. I told you. I can hoe your garden. I just need." "Boy," she said. Her voice was not soft. It was not hard. It was the voice of a person who had made up her mind about something a long time ago and was just now finding out she was right. Boy, come inside before you freeze to death on my porch. The garden can wait until morning. She bent down. She picked up the shotgun slowly, like her back hurt her. She set it just inside the door, leaned against the wall. Then she stepped back and held the door open, and the warm yellow light from the inside of the house spilled out across the porch boards and over Caleb's shoes. He looked at her. He looked at the open door. He looked at the dark road behind him. He stepped inside. The house smelled like wood smoke and biscuits and coffee that had been on the stove too long. The front room was small. A faded braided rug. An old armchair by the window. A pair of muddy work boots by the door lined up neatly set there, as if their owner might come back any minute and put them on. A man's boots. They were dusty. They had not been worn in a while. Caleb noticed the boots. He did not say anything about them. The woman closed the door behind him. The wind died on the other side of it. The whole world seemed to shrink down to this small lit room. "Set the hoe by the door," she said. He set it down carefully. He leaned it against the wall right next to the boots. The two letters on the handle, TH, were turned toward the room. She looked at them. He saw her look. She did not say anything. "In the kitchen, then," she said. "I'll fix you something." He followed her down a short hall. The kitchen was warm and small and clean. A wood-burning stove glowed orange in the corner, and there was a heavy iron pot on top of it, simmering. The smell coming out of that pot made Caleb's knees go weak. It was chicken and broth and something else. Maybe carrots, maybe potatoes. The kind of smell he had not smelled in a year and a half since before his mother got too sick to cook. The woman pointed to a wooden chair at a wooden table. "Sit," she said. He sat. She moved around the kitchen without speaking. She took down a bowl from a high shelf. She ladled stew into it slowly, careful not to spill. She cut a thick slab of bread from a round loaf on the counter and set it on a small plate. She poured a tall glass of milk from a pitcher in an icebox. She put it all in front of him. "Eat," she said. He looked at the food. He looked at her. He had not asked for this much. He had asked for a piece of bread. This was a meal a king would eat. "I can work for it," he said. "Right after. I'll work for as long as you say." Her face did something then that he would remember for the rest of his life. A softening. A breaking. A look that was almost angry and almost kind and was both at the same time. "Boy," she said, "you eat first. We will talk about work after you have eaten. There has been enough working for one night in this house." He picked up the spoon. The first bite went into his mouth, and his eyes filled with water before he could stop them. The food was hot. It tasted like someone had loved making it. He had forgotten what that tasted like. He bent his head over the bowl so she would not see his face, and he ate. He tried to eat slowly. He could not. By the second bite, he was gulping his hands, shaking the spoon clattering against the rim of the bowl. He tore off pieces of bread and pushed them into his mouth. He drank the milk in 3 long swallows that left a white line on his upper lip. He scraped the bowl until the spoon was making sounds against the bare china. The old woman did not say a word the whole time. She sat across from him in the second chair. Her hands were folded on the table. She watched him eat like he was a thing she was afraid would disappear. When he was done, when the bowl was clean and the plate was empty and the glass was empty, he sat back and his stomach felt like it had been put back together. The shaking in his hands was starting to slow. A heaviness was coming over him. The kind of heaviness that comes when a body has been on alert too long and finally remembers it is allowed to be tired. The old woman reached across the table. She did not touch him. She just laid her hand near his on the wood, close enough that he could feel the warmth of it. "What is your name?" she asked. "Caleb," he said. His voice was hoarse. He cleared his throat. "Caleb Mercer." She blinked. Just once. Slow. "Mercer," she said. "Yes, ma'am." Her hand on the table curled into a small fist, and then opened again, and then she said very quietly, "Mercer." He did not know what to do with that. After a moment, she straightened up. The strange softness in her face hardened back into something he could read. Politeness, practicality, the kind of face that knew what to do next, even when the inside of the head was a storm. "I am Edith Holloway," she said. "This is my farm. You will sleep here tonight. We will talk in the morning." "Holloway," he said. "Yes." He nodded slowly. He was so tired that the name slid past him without catching on anything. It was just a sound, a name, a house, a bed for the night. That was all he had hoped for. That was more than he had hoped for. "Thank you," he said. "Ma'am, thank you." Edith Holloway looked at him with those blue eyes that were not cold at all. Not really only weathered the way creek water is cold, but full of life under the ice. "Don't thank me yet," she said. He did not understand what she meant. He was too tired to ask. She stood up. She picked up an oil lamp from the counter and lit it with a kitchen match. The flame caught and steadied, and the kitchen filled with that soft, moving light that is older than electricity. "Come on," she said. "There's a room upstairs." He stood. His legs almost gave out under him. She did not offer to help him, but she walked slowly enough that he could keep up. They left the kitchen and went down the hall and up a narrow wooden staircase that creaked at every step. At the top, there was a short landing with 2 doors. She opened the one on the right. It was a child's bedroom, or it had been once, a long time ago. The room was small with a slanted ceiling under the eaves and a single window looking out over the back fields. There was a narrow bed against one wall made up neatly with a quilt that had a pattern of red and blue stars. A wooden dresser, a small writing desk with a chair pushed in, and on a high shelf above the desk a row of toys, old toys. A wooden horse with the paint worn off, a baseball glove, the leather cracked, a small stuffed bear with one eye missing, a model airplane, one wing broken and taped back together, a tin can full of marbles, things a child had loved and then put away, things that had been waiting on that shelf in the dust for a long, long time. Caleb stopped in the doorway. "Whose room is this?" he said. Edith Holloway did not answer right away. She set the oil lamp down on the desk. She straightened the corner of the quilt that did not need straightening. She kept her back to him. "It used to belong to someone," she said. That was all she said. She turned. She walked past him to the door. In the doorway, she stopped and she looked at him one more time, and her face had that look on it again, the one that was almost angry and almost kind. "Sleep." "Caleb Mercer," she said. "There are clean clothes in the bottom drawer of the dresser. They might fit. The bathroom is at the end of the hall. The lamp will burn for 2 hours. Don't you go wandering this house in the night. You hear me? You stay in this room until I come for you in the morning." "Yes, ma'am." She nodded once. She closed the door behind her. He heard her footsteps go back down the stairs, slow and tired. And then he heard nothing. He stood in the middle of the room for a long minute. Then he sat down on the edge of the bed. The quilt was soft. The pillow smelled like cedar. There was a small frame photograph on the nightstand lying face down, and he did not pick it up. He was too tired to be curious. He pulled off his shoes. He lay back against the pillow without undressing, and he pulled the quilt up to his chin, and he closed his eyes. Sleep came down on him like a heavy hand pressing him into the bed. For the first time, and he did not know how long, his body was warm and full and safe, and his mind began to let go. But just before he fell all the way down into the dark, he opened his eyes one more time. He did not know why. Some part of him had not finished looking yet. His eyes drifted to the dresser, to the bottom drawer she had told him about. The handle was a small brass loop. The wood around it was scratched the way a child's dresser gets scratched from years of small hands. He didn't get up. He just looked, and then his eyes drifted higher, to the top of the dresser. There was something there he hadn't noticed before. A small wooden box, the kind a person keeps letters in. The lid was open. A few papers were sticking out, and one piece had fallen onto the dresser top, half-curled, yellowed by time. It was a photograph. From where he lay, he could not see the front of it. He could only see the back. Brown handwriting on the back. He could not read it from here. He should have closed his eyes and slept. He didn't. He sat up slow as a person sitting up in a dream, and he crossed the room in his stocking feet. He picked up the photograph from the dresser. He turned it over. It was an old picture. The colors had faded into the yellows and pinks of summer that has gone too long ago. It showed a girl. Maybe 15, maybe 16, hard to tell from the way the picture had faded. Tall and thin, with hair the color of corn silk falling around her shoulders. She was standing in a vegetable garden. She was wearing a sundress and barefoot in the dirt. She was laughing at the camera, one hand up to push her hair out of her eyes. In her other hand, leaning against her shoulder, was an old garden hoe with a long wooden handle. Even in the faded picture, Caleb could see the shape of two letters carved low on the handle. TH. Standing next to her was an older man, tall, lean, a weathered face, gray hair under a sweat-stained cap. He had one arm around the girl's shoulders, and he was looking at her, not at the camera, with a smile on his mouth that was small and proud, and full of something Caleb did not have a word for. Love, maybe. The big kind. Caleb turned the photo over. The brown handwriting was a woman's. Sarah and Daddy. Spring, 2005. He stopped breathing. He looked at the front of the photo again. The girl in the picture was his mother. She was younger than he had ever seen her. She was happier than he had ever seen her. She was standing in a garden behind a house Caleb had never been to, in the arms of a man whose name he did not know, holding a hoe whose carved letters he had never been told the meaning of. The hoe leaning by the door downstairs. The hoe he had carried for 2 years. The hoe she had kept in the corner of her bedroom and never explained. Sarah and Daddy. His mother's name had been Sarah. His grandfather, whoever he was, had carved his initials into a hoe, and his mother had carried that hoe out of this very house, and Caleb did not know how he knew that. But he knew. Down in the kitchen, a chair scraped against the floor. Edith Holloway was up. She had not gone to bed. She was still down there in the kitchen, and now she was crying. He could hear it. A small, dry, terrible sound. The kind of crying a person does when they have been waiting a long time to do it. The crying of someone who had thought she was the last one left and had just found out she was not. Caleb stood in the lamplight holding the photograph, and somewhere underneath all his tiredness, a single thought rose up quiet and clear. Whose room had this been? Whose toys were on the shelf? Why had the gun fallen out of the old woman's hands when she saw the letters on the handle? Why had the kitchen gone silent when he said his name was Mercer? He did not have the answers, but he knew the way a boy knows things without knowing how he knows them, that he was standing inside the answer, that this small house lost in the Kentucky hills was not just a place where someone had taken him in. It was a place he had come from. He put the photograph back where he had found it. He went back to the bed. He lay down with the quilt pulled to his chin, and for a long time he stared at the ceiling, listening to the faint sound of the old woman crying in the kitchen below. Eventually, he slept. Outside, the wind moved through the cottonwoods and the moon rose over the ridge and the house was quiet again. It was quiet for the rest of the night. It would not be quiet in the morning. In the morning, when the rooster crowed and the sky over the eastern ridge began to bleed pink, Caleb Mercer was still asleep in the small bed under the eaves. He did not hear the engine yet. He did not hear the tires of a red pickup truck turning off the main road and grinding up the dirt lane. He did not hear the second vehicle behind it, a clean white sedan that did not belong on a farm road driven by a woman in a gray suit with a leather briefcase on the seat beside her. He did not hear the truck door slam. He did not hear the heavy boots of his stepfather on the gravel. He did not hear Edith Holloway downstairs in her kitchen set down her coffee cup very slowly and stand up and walk to the window and see who was coming up her drive. He slept, and the day that would change everything came up over the ridge to find him. The sound that woke him was not a sound he knew. It was the sound of an engine, a truck engine, deep and rough, the kind that needed work and was not getting it. The kind of engine he had heard idling in his own driveway 1,000 mornings of his life. Caleb Mercer opened his eyes in the small bed under the eaves, and for one whole second, he did not remember where he was. He saw the slanted ceiling above him and the soft pink light coming through the window, and he thought he was home. He thought his mother was about to call him down for breakfast. Then he remembered. The engine outside cut off. A door slammed. Heavy boots on gravel. A second car door lighter, almost dainty. A woman's voice, brisk and businesslike, saying something he could not make out. Caleb sat up slowly. The quilt fell from his chest. His clothes were the same dirty clothes he had walked in last night, and the smell of the road was still on him. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and put his feet on the cold wooden floor. He went to the window. Down in the driveway, the red pickup truck was parked sideways across the dirt lane, blocking the gate. He knew that truck. The dent in the rear quarter panel, the cracked taillight, the chrome bumper held on with a strand of wire. He had ridden in the bed of that truck 100 times, watching the road slide away behind him, the wind in his hair. His stepfather, Wade Tanner, was standing beside it. He had on his good shirt, the blue one with the pearl buttons. His hair was combed flat. He had even shaved, though there was a small spot of dried blood on his jaw. He looked from up here almost like a respectable man. Behind him, beside a clean white sedan, stood a woman. She was maybe 50, narrow and tidy in a gray suit and low heels that were sinking a quarter-inch into the soft dirt of the lane. She had a leather briefcase in one hand and a folder in the other. Her hair was pulled back severe. She was the kind of woman who, even at this distance, looked like she had a stamp in her pocket and was looking for paper to put it on. Caleb's whole body went cold. He did not know who she was, but he knew what she was. She was the woman his stepfather had been arguing with on the phone yesterday, the woman whose call had finally pushed Wade past the edge of his rope, the woman named Marlene Doyle, from the county. Down on the porch, the front door opened. Caleb could not see the porch from this angle, but he heard it. Then he heard Edith Holloway's voice, calm as flat water. "Help you." Wade Tanner put on his good voice, the voice he used at gas stations and hardware counters. the voice that fooled people who did not know him. "Morning, ma'am. Sorry to bother you so early. Name's Wade Tanner. I believe you got something of mine." Caleb pressed his forehead against the cold glass of the window. His breath fogged it. He wiped the fog away with his sleeve. "Down below, Edith said, 'I don't believe I do.'" Wade laughed. It was the laugh he used when he was about to do something mean. "I think you do, ma'am. I think you got my boy in there. He run off yesterday. Got it in his head to give me trouble. He's 11 years old, and he ain't got the sense God gave a chicken. I come to take him home." There was a small silence. Then Caleb heard Edith say very level, "Your boy." "Yes, ma'am. My stepson. His mother passed last winter. I've been raising him on my own since. It ain't been easy, but family is family." Then the woman in this gray suit spoke. Her voice carried up to the window, brisk and trained. "Mrs. Holloway, my name is Marlene Doyle. I'm a caseworker with the Department of Social Services for Pine Hollow County. We received a report yesterday afternoon that a minor in our system had been removed from his legal residence. Mr. Tanner here is the legally appointed guardian of the child, Caleb Mercer, following the death of the boy's biological mother. We have documentation. I'd like to come inside and discuss this with you. We need to confirm the boy's safety and return him to his guardian." It was all so smooth, so official. Caleb pressed his hand to his stomach, where the warm food from last night was suddenly sitting cold and heavy. He could not hear what Edith said next. Her voice was lower. He stepped back from the window. He grabbed his shoes from beside the bed and pulled them on without socks. He went out into the hall on quiet feet. At the top of the stairs, he stopped. The voices in the front room were clearer here. "I would like to see the documentation Edith was saying." "Of course," said Marlene Doyle. Papers being slid across a table. Wade's voice, smaller now, quieter, but with the meanness right under the surface. "You see there, ma'am? Court order, death certificate, guardian appointment, all proper. Filed and stamped. The boy is mine." A long silence. Then Edith said, "This paper says you are entitled to certain federal benefits on the boy's behalf." "I'll take care of him," Wade said. "Survivor benefits," Edith said like she was reading. $1,273 a month, paid into your account. "That money goes to his upkeep," Wade said. "Roof over his head, food in his belly, clothes on his back. That is what that money is for." "Mr. Tanner," said Marlene Doyle in a voice that suddenly was a little harder than it had been, "we are not here to discuss the disbursement of the survivor benefit. We are here to recover a missing minor." "I understand," Wade said. "I understand, ma'am. I just want to make sure this lady understands too." Caleb sat down on the top step. He put his head on his knees. He felt sick. $1,273 a month. He had not known the number. He had not known there was a number. He had only known that since his mother died, his stepfather had bought a new flat-screen television and a new chainsaw he never used, and a freezer full of beer while Caleb had eaten crackers from the gas station for supper. He had thought it was just bad money management. He had thought it was just Wade being Wade. It had not been that. It had been theft. It had been theft of his mother's last gift to him. His chest hurt. Down in the front room, Edith was speaking again. "There is also a deed here." "Yes, ma'am." The boy inherited a small parcel from his mother. 40 acres up near Bryant's Ridge. It is held in trust until he comes of age. I am the trustee. Edith was quiet a moment. "You are the trustee," she said. "That is correct. So you can sell it. I have no plans to sell it. You can, though. As trustee, Mrs. Holloway, said Marlene Doyle, her voice tight now. We are getting off topic. Mr. Tanner's financial arrangements are not pertinent to this conversation. The boy needs to be returned to his legal guardian. Caleb wrapped his arms around his knees. The hallway was cold. From down below, he heard Edith Holloway take a long breath. Then she said, "The boy is safe. He is upstairs. He is asleep. He came to my door last night half starved and shaking, and he asked me if he could hoe my garden in exchange for a piece of bread. I gave him supper, and I gave him a bed. I did not steal him. I took him in. There is a difference." "I appreciate that," said Marlene Doyle. "I truly do. But the law sees only one fact, which is that this child's legal guardian is asking for him back. I'm going to need you to step aside and let me get him." Edith said no. Caleb stopped breathing. Marlene Doyle's voice came back cooler. "Mrs. Holloway, please understand. If you obstruct the return of a minor to his legal guardian, you are committing a crime. I do not want to involve the sheriff, but I will. Then call him." Edith said. Wade made a sound, a small, ugly sound. "Lady," he said, "you are losing your mind. He is my boy. His own mother named me on the papers. You do not have the first clue what you are sticking your nose into." Edith said, "I know one thing." "What?" "I know that any boy who walks half a day in the cold, rather than spend one more night in your house, is a boy who has been told something a long time before he ran. And I have lived long enough to know what that something is." The room went silent. Caleb sat at the top of the stairs, and his eyes burned. Then Wade laughed. The mean laugh. The one that had no joy in it. "Old woman," he said. "Old woman. You don't know nothing. You are looking at a boy you met yesterday like he is yours. He is not yours. Do you understand that? He is not yours. You are sitting here in a house that smells like mothballs and old people, and you are trying to decide my family for me. Lady, you do not even know his name." "Caleb Mercer," Edith said. "His name is Caleb Mercer. His mother was Sarah. He has her eyes and her hands, and he is wearing the dust of the road on his shoes. And you are standing in front of me trying to tell me that $1,273 a month is for his upkeep, when I can see through the window that your truck is brand new. The truck is leased." The point said, "Edith Holloway, the point, Mr. Tanner, is that I am not stepping aside." Marlene Doyle said, "Ma'am." Edith said, "Ma'am, yourself. I want you to come back with the sheriff. I want you to come back with a court order signed by a judge in this county. Because I am informing you that if you take that boy out of my house against his will today, without a deputy standing on my porch to enforce it, I will get my shotgun, and I will sit on this porch until somebody more reasonable than the two of you shows up. I do not bluff, Miss Doyle. I am too old to bluff." Silence. Then a chair scraped. Wade Tanner's voice cold now, the polite mask gone. "You are going to regret this, lady." "I have lived a long time," Edith said. "I am full up on regret. There is no more room." The screen door creaked. Boots on the porch boards. Then more boots, lighter, quicker. The two cars started up. The truck door slammed hard enough to shake the windows. Caleb heard the truck back up too fast in the lane, gravel spitting under its tires, and then the white sedan pulling out behind it, slower, careful. Then he heard nothing, just the wind moving in the trees and a single rooster crowing his last crow of the morning. Caleb sat at the top of the stairs. After a minute, Edith Holloway's footsteps came across the front room. She stopped at the bottom of the stairs. He knew she could see him sitting there. He did not look up. She said, "Caleb." He did not answer. She said, "Come down." He stood up slowly. He came down the stairs one at a time, holding the rail. At the bottom, he stopped on the last step. He could not look at her face. He looked at her hands instead. They were folded in front of her apron, knotted up tight. "He's going to come back," Caleb said. "Isn't he?" "Yes," she said. "With the sheriff?" "Yes. And then I have to go." She did not answer. She was looking past him out the small window in the hall at nothing in particular. After a moment, she said, "Come into the kitchen. I will fix you breakfast. Then you and I are going into town." "Town?" "Yes." "What for?" "I need to talk to a man," she said. "About paper." The drive into Pine Hollow took 20 minutes in Edith's old brown station wagon. Caleb sat in the passenger seat with his hands flat on his thighs. He did not speak. The hoe was in the back seat laid across the cracked vinyl. Edith had said, "Bring it." He had not asked why. The road wound down out of the hills and along a creek that ran clear over flat slate stones. Sycamores leaned over the water. Cows grazed in a brown pasture. The whole valley looked in the morning light like it had looked for 100 years and would look for 100 more. Pine Hollow itself was 4 streets long. A bank, a post office, a feed store, a Baptist church, a diner with 2 pickup trucks parked outside, and a small brick building that said Pine Hollow County Farmers Trust on a wooden sign. Edith parked in front of the bank. She did not get out right away. She sat there with her hands on the wheel looking at the brick face of the building. She said, "You stay in the car." "Yes, ma'am. If a man comes up to this car and asks who you are, you tell him you are Edith Holloway's grandnephew, visiting from out of state. You do not tell him your last name." Caleb looked at her. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "I will not be long," she said. She was in the bank for 30 minutes. Caleb watched the door the whole time. When she came out, her face was set in a way he had not seen before. Not angry. Worse than angry. Defeated. She walked to the car like a woman who had taken a punch and was not going to fall down, but was thinking about it. She got in. She did not start the car. Caleb said, "Ma'am." She did not look at him. She said, "The bank is going to take my farm." The words did not make sense to him for a moment. "Take it," he said. "Foreclose. They have been sending me letters for 3 months. I have been ignoring them. I had thought I might catch up. I cannot. The note is 60 days from due. 60 days from the auction." Caleb did not know what to say. He looked at his own hands. She started the car. She pulled out of the parking spot. She drove down the main street and turned left at the church and stopped in front of a small white house with a wooden porch and a hand-painted sign by the front walk. The sign said, "Walter R. Boyd, attorney at law, retired." Edith said, "Come on." He followed her up the walk. The man who answered the door was old. Older than her by the look of him, maybe 75. Tall and thin and stooped with a head of fine white hair, brushed back and a pair of glasses pushed up onto his forehead. He had a coffee cup in one hand. He took one look at Edith and his face changed. "Edith Holloway," he said. "Walter." He looked past her and saw the boy. His eyes went to Caleb. Then to the hoe Caleb was holding because Edith had told him to bring it in. Then back to Caleb. Walter Boyd was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Well, you had better come in." The front room of his house was a study. Books everywhere. Law books in dark bindings, 2 walls of them. A heavy oak desk with a green lamp on it. A pair of leather chairs in front of the desk. The walls smelled like pipe tobacco. even though Caleb did not see a pipe. Walter sat behind the desk. Edith took one chair. Caleb took the other. He laid the hoe across his knees. Walter looked at the hoe. Then he looked at Edith. "Whose boy?" he said. "Sit," Walter said. "Edith, listen." He sat. He listened. Edith told him everything from the moment she had heard the gate creak last night to the moment she had walked out of the bank 20 minutes ago. She told it plain, no extra words. The boy on the porch, the hoe with the carved letters, the photograph in the upstairs bedroom, the breakfast that had not happened because the truck had come up the lane, Wade Tanner, Marlene Doyle, the papers, the $1,273, the deed to the 40 acres, the threat to come back with the sheriff. Walter Boyd listened with his hands folded on the desk. He did not interrupt. Once he closed his eyes for a moment, the way a man closes his eyes when he is hearing a thing he has been afraid of hearing for a long time. When she was done, the room was quiet. Outside, a delivery truck went by on the main street. Walter looked at Caleb. "Son," he said, "what is your full legal name?" "Caleb Mercer, sir." "Your mother's name?" "Sarah Mercer." "Maiden name?" Caleb said. "I do not know." Walter glanced at Edith. "She kept that from him," Edith said softly. "She must have had her reasons." Caleb said, "What are you talking about?" Walter Boyd looked at him over his glasses. He had pale gray eyes that had spent 50 years reading the small print on contracts, and they did not blink. "Son," he said, "I want you to look at something." He opened a drawer of his desk. He took out a wide, flat scrapbook, leather-bound, the kind a person makes for themselves over many years. He laid it on the desk. He opened it to a page about halfway through. He turned it around so Caleb could see. It was a yellowed clipping from a small newspaper, the Pine Hollow Gazette. The headline said, "Local Teen Missing." There was a photograph beneath the headline, a high school graduation portrait, a girl with hair the color of corn silk, a small, careful smile, her name underneath, Sarah Holloway, age 17. Caleb stared at the picture. It was his mother. She was younger than he had ever seen her, younger than the girl in the photograph upstairs. But it was her, the same eyes, the same mouth, the same shy, careful way of looking at a camera like she did not quite trust it. Sarah Holloway, not Mercer. Holloway. Caleb's mouth opened. He could not make a sound. Walter Boyd said gently, "Your mother grew up in this town, son. She grew up in the house you slept in last night. She left when she was 17 years old in the spring of 2006. She did not say goodbye to anyone. She did not write a letter. She did not call. The Gazette ran this article 2 weeks after she left. Edith and Thomas put up a reward. There was no news. After a while, people stopped looking. Caleb's hands had gone numb on the handle of the hoe. He looked at Edith. Edith was crying without making a sound. Her face was wet. Her hands in her lap were trembling. Walter said the man in the photograph upstairs, the one with his arm around her, that is her father. Thomas Holloway. He passed in 2018. He carved his initials into that hoe when he was 20 years old. TH. He used it every day of his life. After he passed, that hoe stayed in the corner of the kitchen for almost a year. Then one day, Edith says it was gone. "I thought a thief had taken it," Edith whispered. Caleb said, "My mother took it." "Yes," said Walter. "We believe she did. We believe she came back to that house sometime after her father died and took the one thing of his she could carry. and then she left again. And you, Caleb, you grew up not knowing. The room blurred. Caleb wiped at his face with the back of his hand. He said, "Mr. Boyd, my mother's name was Sarah Mercer." That was her married name, Walter said. We will need to confirm it, but I believe her birth name was Sarah Lynn Holloway. Born here in Pine Hollow in 1989. Daughter of Thomas Edgar Holloway and Edith Marie Holloway, whose maiden name was Cardwell. He paused. Which would make this woman, he said, your grandmother. Caleb turned his head, slowly. He looked at Edith Holloway. She was looking back at him through her tears. She was not trying to hide them now. Her hands, those hands that had ladled stew and sliced bread and held a shotgun the night before, were shaking on her knees, like the hands of a woman half her age would not have shaken. She said, I knew. I knew when I saw you on the porch. I saw your mother in your face. But I did not let myself believe it. I have made myself not believe things for a long time. It is safer. He said you knew last night. I did. You did not tell me. You were starving, she said. You were a boy who had walked all day with no supper. You needed to eat first. And then you needed to sleep. And then I needed time to be sure of what I was looking at. Because I am an old woman. And old women have to be careful what they let themselves want. Caleb stood up. The hoe slid off his lap. It hit the rug with a soft thud. He did not pick it up. He walked to the window of Walter Boyd's study. He stood there with his back to them and looked out at the bare branches of a maple tree in the front yard. The sky behind it was very blue. He thought of his mother in the upstairs bedroom of the house in town. In the house that was now Wade Tanner's house, dying. He thought of her hand on his hand. He thought of the last words she had said to him. You remember who you are. You remember whose blood is in you. She had not been talking about Wade Tanner. She had not been talking about herself even. She had been talking about a place, about a man with weathered hands who had carved his name into a hoe, about a woman who had stood every Sunday on the front porch of a small white farmhouse and watched the road for nearly 20 years hoping a daughter would come walking back up it. His mother had known. She had known the whole time. And she had not been able to come home because she was too proud, or too ashamed, or too sick, or too afraid. And then she had run out of time, but she had given him the hoe. She had pointed him with a piece of carved wood in the only direction she could not bring him in herself. Caleb's eyes stung. He pressed his palm against the cold glass of the window. He did not let himself sob. After a minute, he turned around. Edith was still in her chair. She had not stood up. Her face was wet and old and waiting. Caleb said, "Can I?" and his voice cracked and he started over. "Can I sit by you?" Edith said, "Yes, Caleb, you can sit by me." He went to her. He did not know how to hug her. He had not hugged anyone since his mother. So he just sat down on the rug at her feet and he leaned his head against her knee. Her hand came down on his hair. It rested there light as a leaf. She did not say anything. Neither did he. Walter Boyd cleared his throat after a long moment. He said very quietly, "Well, we have got some work to do." "Yes," said Edith. He pulled a yellow legal pad toward himself. He took a fountain pen out of a drawer. He uncapped it. He looked at Caleb on the floor and at Edith with her hand on the boy's hair. And he made a small noise in his throat that was not quite a laugh and not quite a sigh. He said, "I owe your husband a great deal, Edith. He stood by me one summer when I had no business asking it of him. I have never been able to pay that back. I would like to try now." Edith said, "Walter, I have no money." Walter said, "I know." He started writing on the pad. He said, "First thing, we are going to need a copy of Caleb's birth certificate, the original if possible. His mother kept it somewhere. Did she keep a box? A drawer? A safe?" Caleb thought. "There is a metal box," he said, "under her side of the bed. It has a little key. I think Wade has the key now. But the box is still there. I saw it last week." Walter wrote. Second, he said, "We are going to need anything she left behind in her own handwriting. Letters, notes, a diary if she kept one, a will if she wrote one, anything that speaks for her. Did she write things down?" "She wrote in a notebook," Caleb said. "A green one. I do not know where it is." Edith's hand on his hair tightened a little. Walter said, "Third thing, I want you to listen to me, Caleb, because this part is important." Caleb looked up. Walter Boyd's pale gray eyes were on him steady. "The man, Wade Tanner, is going to come back," he said. "He is going to come back with a sheriff, or with a court order, or with both. He is going to try to make you go with him. The law in this state is on the side of a guardian, even a bad guardian until a judge says otherwise. I am going to file an emergency petition in family court tomorrow morning. I'm going to ask for temporary custody to be transferred from Wade Tanner to Edith Holloway pending a full hearing. I think we have a real chance, but it will not be quick. And while we wait, that man has the law on his side, and we have a piece of paper from a doctor and a hoe with 2 letters on it." He paused. "So I am going to ask you a question, son. And I am going to ask you to be honest with me, because you are the only one who can answer it." "Yes, sir." "Has your stepfather ever hurt you, hit you, shaken you, locked you somewhere? Anything that left a mark on you? Anything that scared you?" Caleb did not answer right away. He thought about the night last winter, 2 weeks after his mother's funeral, when Wade had come home drunk and found Caleb crying on the kitchen floor over a broken plate. He thought about what had happened then. He thought about the way his ear had rung for 2 days. He thought about the bruise on his back from the table edge. He thought about other nights. He had never told anyone. He had not told the school nurse who had asked him that one time whether everything was all right at home. He had said, "Yes, ma'am," because he had been afraid, and because his mother had still been alive then, and he had not wanted to make trouble for her. He looked at Walter Boyd. He looked at Edith. Edith Holloway was looking down at him with eyes that had rained themselves clear. Caleb said, "Yes, sir." Walter Boyd nodded once. He said, "All right, son. We are going to write that down." That afternoon, they did 3 things. They drove to the county hospital where a quiet woman in a white coat photographed an old yellow bruise on Caleb's lower back and a small round scar on his shoulder he had not noticed himself for years. She wrote things on a clipboard. She did not ask him to talk much. She gave him a stick of gum on the way out. They drove to the Pine Hollow Sheriff's Office, where Walter Boyd spoke for 40 minutes with a tall man in a brown uniform whose nameplate said Hayes. Edith sat with Caleb on a wooden bench in the front room. The sheriff and Walter came out together. The sheriff looked at Caleb for a long time. He did not smile, but he put his hand on Caleb's shoulder gentle, and he said, "Son, you do not need to be afraid in my county. We will sort this out. You hear?" "Yes, sir," Caleb said. Then they drove back to Pine Hollow's small grocery store where Edith bought $4 worth of bologna and a half loaf of bread and a quart of milk, because her purse held $12 and she needed 8 of them for gasoline. The woman behind the counter, a stout woman in her 60s with glasses on a chain, watched them ring up the meager pile of food. She watched Caleb, who was holding the hoe. She watched Edith, who was counting bills out of a small black coin purse. The woman said, "Edith, that boy with you." "He's with me," said Edith. The woman behind the counter pursed her mouth. She did not say anything else, but Caleb felt her eyes on his back the whole walk to the door. By the time they got home, the light was going gold over the ridges. The chickens scratched at the dirt by the porch. Everything looked exactly the way it had looked when they left that morning, but it was not the same. Caleb knew it was not the same. He could feel it in the air. Things had been said today that could not be unsaid. Doors had been opened that could not be closed. He helped Edith carry the bag of groceries to the kitchen. She set the bread on the counter. She turned to put the milk in the refrigerator. That was when the phone rang. The phone in Edith Holloway's house was an old one, yellow plastic, bolted to the wall by the kitchen door. The cord was long enough to reach all the way to the table. It rang with an old hard ring, the kind of ring that made you jump. Edith looked at it. She set the milk down on the counter. She walked over slowly. She picked up the receiver. "Holloway," she said. Caleb watched her face. He saw her listen. He saw her jaw set. He saw her free hand close into a fist on the counter. She said, "Doris." A pause. She said, "No, Doris. No, I do not think I am sure. But I am sure enough." Another pause. She said, "What people are saying back then is no business of yours, Doris. It was not your business then. It is not your business now." A longer pause. Edith said, "Doris, I'm going to hang this telephone up. I am going to hang it up because I love you, and I have known you for 50 years, and I do not want to say what I will say if you keep talking. Goodbye, Doris." She hung up the phone. She stood with her hand on the receiver for a minute. Then the phone rang again. She stared at it. It rang 4 times. She did not pick it up. It rang 10 times. It stopped. Then it started again. Caleb watched her. She did not look at him. She walked to the wall. She bent down. She unplugged the cord from the jack. The kitchen went silent. Edith straightened up slowly. Her hand was still on the cord. She said almost to herself, "I had forgotten how fast it gets around. I had forgotten that." Caleb said, "Ma'am." She turned to look at him. He said, "What are they saying?" Edith Holloway looked at her grandson. The afternoon light came through the kitchen window in long bars. Her face in that light was very old, older than he had seen it last night. She said, "They are saying that I am a foolish old woman who has lost her wits. They are saying that I am taking in a strange child off the road because I lost my own daughter, and I cannot tell the difference anymore. They are saying that the boy is probably running from something he should not be running from. They are saying that the sheriff ought to come and get him. They are saying that whatever happened to Sarah Holloway 19 years ago was probably the mother's fault. And they are saying it now because nothing brings a town together like a chance to be right about something they were wrong about back then." She paused. She said, "That is what they are saying." Caleb did not know what to do with any of it. He said, "You are not a foolish old woman." Edith looked at him. The corners of her eyes crinkled. It was almost a smile. Not quite, but almost. She said, "No, child, I am not." Then she turned away from him. She put one hand on the counter to steady herself. The other hand went to her face. Her shoulders began to shake. Caleb watched her. He did not know what to do. Then he set the hoe against the kitchen wall, and he went to her and he put his small arms around her waist from behind. He pressed his face against the back of her apron. He did not say anything. For a long minute, the old woman cried into her hand, and the boy held on. The kitchen smelled like the breakfast neither of them had eaten. The wood stove was cold. The afternoon light came through the window and lay across the table. Finally, she put her hand on his hand, and she said, "Oh, Caleb." He said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "I have been alone in this house for nearly 20 years. I have been alone in this house since the night your mother climbed out of her bedroom window and disappeared. I have been alone in this house since my husband died with a question in his mouth, and no answer for it. I've been alone so long I forgot what it felt like to not be alone. I forgot I could be anything else." She turned around. She knelt down on the kitchen floor, slow, with her hands on his shoulders. Her face was an inch from his. She said, "I am not going to let him take you. Do you hear me? I am not going to let any man, any paper, any judge, any sheriff take you out of this house against your will. I do not care what it costs me. The bank can have the farm. They can have the chickens. They can have the cow and the barn and the 4 walls and the well. They cannot have you. Do you understand?" He nodded. He could not speak. She said, "You are the last piece of my daughter, and I am the last piece of your blood. We are going to fight for each other now. Both of us. Do you hear?" "Yes, ma'am." She put her forehead against his. She said, "Caleb Mercer Holloway, that is your name. That is who you are. Your mother put you in my hands the day she put that hoe in yours. We are not going to fail her. Not now." The kitchen was very quiet. Caleb whispered, "Yes, ma'am." Edith Holloway closed her eyes. She held him there for a long moment, her hands on his shoulders, his forehead against hers, the late sun coming through the window and lighting them both in gold. Then, somewhere outside, far down the lane, the sound of an engine. A different engine this time. Heavier, slower, official. A car coming up the dirt road. Edith Holloway opened her eyes. Caleb opened his. Their faces were inches apart. He saw her eyes go from soft to hard in the space of a heartbeat. She let go of his shoulders. She stood up. She walked calm and steady across the kitchen floor, and she opened the cabinet next to the stove, and she took down a small green metal box that had been sitting on the top shelf for nearly 20 years. She put the box on the table. She opened it. Inside the box was a folded piece of paper, yellowed, old, dust on the creases. She unfolded it. It was a single page in a girl's handwriting. The handwriting tilted forward with a young woman's hurry. Caleb could see his mother in the way the letters leaned. Edith looked at the paper. She read it once. She closed her eyes. She said, "Caleb." "Yes, ma'am. I want you to listen to me. The car coming up that lane that is the sheriff. Or that is your stepfather. Or that is the woman from the county. I do not know which. It does not matter which. Before they come through that door, I need to tell you something your mother wrote a long time ago. And I need you to hear it from me. Because if I do not say it now in this kitchen, I'm afraid I will not get the chance to say it again." "Yes, ma'am." She held the paper up. Her hand was shaking. The afternoon light came through the page and lit the ink from behind, and Caleb could see the shape of his mother's words on the back in mirror image, like a ghost. Edith Holloway took a breath, and she began to read. The letter was short. Mama, I am sorry. I am writing this in the bus station because I am afraid if I write it at home, I will not have the courage to leave. By the time you read this, I will be a long way away. Do not look for me. I am not coming home. I cannot tell you why. Someday, maybe I will. Tell Daddy I love him more than anything. Tell him I am taking the small piece of him with me that fits in my pocket. He will know what I mean. I love you, Mama. I am sorry. Sarah. Edith stopped. She lowered the page. Her hand did not stop shaking. There was no envelope, she said. No stamp. She must have written it and never mailed it. She must have meant to leave it on the kitchen table and lost her nerve. I found this stuffed inside her pillowcase 3 days after she went. I have read it once a year for nearly 20 years. Just once, on the day she left. I never read it any other day. Caleb stood at the table. The light through the window was on his face. He said the small piece of him that fits in my pocket. Edith said your grandfather kept a pocket knife, a little folding one with a bone handle. He carried it every day of his life. We could not find it after he died. We thought it was lost in the field somewhere. Caleb's eyes went distant. He said, I have it. Edith looked at him. I have it, he said. It is in the metal box under her bed. The one I told Mr. Boyd about. She kept it wrapped up in a handkerchief. She used to hold it when she was sick. She would not let anyone touch it. Not even me. She said it was the only thing she had left from her father. I thought she meant my grandfather on my dad's side. I never met any of them. I did not know there was another side. Edith put her hand over her mouth. The sound of the engine outside was closer now. The crunch of tires on gravel had reached the gate. Caleb did not turn his head. The whole of his attention was on his grandmother's face. Edith said, Caleb, listen to me. We do not have a minute. The sheriff is at the gate. Whatever happens in the next hour, whatever is said, whatever is asked of you, you do not lie. You do not exaggerate. You tell what is true. Do you hear me? The truth in this kitchen has been waiting nearly 20 years. It is going to come out today. We let it. Yes, ma'am. She folded the letter. She put it back in the green tin box. She closed the lid. She set the box on the table where any person walking in could see it. Then she straightened her apron with both hands. She lifted her chin. She walked to the front door. A door slammed outside. Then another. Then a third. 3 vehicles. Not one. Caleb followed her down the hall. Through the screen of the front door in the yellow sunset light, 3 vehicles were parked in the lane. The first was the brown county cruiser with Sheriff Dale Hayes climbing out of it, slow as hat already in his hand. The second was the white sedan from the morning with Marlene Doyle stepping out of it, her face tight. The third was the red pickup. Wade Tanner was already standing beside it, his good blue shirt now untucked. His hair no longer combed, his eyes red-rimmed and bright, with something that was not just whiskey. Sheriff Hayes was the first to reach the porch. He removed his hat all the way. He stepped up onto the boards. Edith, he said. Dale. Mind if I come inside, ma'am? You alone. Just me, ma'am. Miss Doyle and Mr. Tanner are going to wait on the porch. I asked them to. Edith stepped aside. She held the screen door open. The sheriff came through it. His boots were polished. He was a tall man, thin in his 50s, with gray at the temples and the kind of slow, easy face that did not give away what was happening behind it. He looked at Caleb. "Son," he said, "you all right?" "Yes, sir." The sheriff nodded once. He looked at Edith. He held up a folded paper. "I got something here," he said, "and I want to show it to you both before I show it to anybody else. It came across my desk an hour ago. It came in by fax from a woman named Marlene Doyle's office, and it is signed by a judge over in the next county. Because Mr. Tanner felt this morning's conversation had not gone his way, and he went and found himself a friendly judge by lunch." He unfolded the paper. He held it up under the hall light. It was a court order. Edith took it from him with both hands. She read it. Her mouth set. She handed it back without a word. "The sheriff said this is a temporary order to return the minor child Caleb Mercer to the custody of his legal guardian Wade Tanner, pending a full hearing. It is signed and stamped. It is enforceable." Edith said nothing. She was looking at the floor. Caleb said, "Sir." The sheriff looked at him. Caleb said, "Can I show you something first?" Sheriff Hayes tilted his head a little. "Show me what, son?" Caleb said, "Can you wait 15 minutes? Just 15. I want to get something out of my mother's house. It is in a metal box under my mother's bed. It is mine. She left it for me. Mr. Boyd told me to find it. I think you should see what is in it before you take me back to that house." The sheriff looked at Edith. Edith looked at the sheriff. The sheriff looked at the paper in his hand. He said, "Son, I am going to be straight with you. I am not the law that wrote this order. I am the law that has to carry it. I cannot drive you out to fetch a box. I have to take you with me when I leave this porch tonight." Caleb felt his stomach drop. Then the sheriff said, But what, sir? But there is no rule against your stepfather following me out to his own house, in his own truck, with you in my cruiser, and us going up to the front door together. There is no rule against you walking into your own bedroom in your own house and picking up a box that belongs to you. And there is no rule against me looking at what is in that box on account of I am a peace officer, and I am present at the scene." He looked at Edith. "Mrs. Holloway," he said, "would you say that boy has the right to retrieve his personal property from his legal residence in the presence of an officer of the court?" Edith said, "Yes, Dale, I would." The sheriff nodded once. Then he opened the screen door and he stepped back out onto the porch. And he said in a voice loud enough for both Wade Tanner and Marlene Doyle to hear Mr. Tanner, "We are going to your residence. The boy is coming with me in the cruiser. He has personal effects to retrieve before he stays the night. You will follow in your truck. Miss Doyle, ma'am, you will follow in your sedan. We are doing this by the book." Wade Tanner took a step forward. He said the boy don't need anything from that house. Nothing in there is his. Sheriff Hayes turned his head very slowly. He looked at Wade Tanner. He did not raise his voice. He said, "Mr. Tanner, you and I are going to get along better today if you let me say what is going to happen, and you do not tell me different. You hear me?" Wade did not answer, but he stepped back. The sheriff said, "Caleb." "Come on, son." Caleb looked at Edith. Edith Holloway nodded once the smallest nod. "Go," she said. He went. The drive back to the Tanner house was 20 minutes the wrong way. Caleb sat in the front of the cruiser. The seat smelled like vinyl and coffee and an old air freshener shaped like a pine tree. The radio crackled softly under the dash. The sheriff did not speak. He drove with one hand on the wheel and one wrist on his knee. and once or twice he glanced sideways at the boy. After about 10 minutes of nothing, the sheriff said, "Your grandfather was a good man." Caleb looked over. "Thomas Holloway," the sheriff said. "I knew him. I went to his church when I was a boy. He fixed my daddy's truck once for free on account of we did not have the money. He never asked anybody for a thing. I cried at his funeral. There were 200 people there." Caleb did not know what to say. The sheriff said, "Your mother. I knew her too. She used to sit in the back row of the choir with my younger sister. She had a singing voice would crack your heart in two. The night she went missing, half the town was out walking the woods with flashlights. We did not stop looking for a year." He turned to look at Caleb. "I just want you to know that," he said. "I want you to know that wherever your mama went when she left this place, she left a town behind that loved her. And whatever made her run, it was not because nobody here would have caught her." Caleb's eyes burned. He looked out the side window. He did not let himself cry. The cruiser turned off the county road and onto the gravel drive that led up to the only house he had ever lived in. The house came into view through the bare branches. The front yard was full of beer cans. The porch railing he had broken 3 months ago was still broken. The dog that used to live on the chain was gone. Wade had given it away last spring when feeding it had become inconvenient. The cruiser pulled up. The pickup pulled up behind it. The white sedan stopped at the foot of the drive. Caleb opened his door. He walked up the porch steps. Sheriff Hayes walked behind him. Wade Tanner climbed out of his truck and stood in the yard, watching with his arms folded, and a look on his face that was hard to read in the dusk. Inside the house smelled the way it had always smelled lately. Old beer and cigarette smoke and something else underneath a sourness, the smell of a place where nobody opened a window. Caleb walked through the front room without looking at it. He walked down the hall. He stopped in the doorway of his mother's bedroom. He had not been in this room since the morning she died. Wade had locked it after the funeral. Wade had said nothing in there for you, boy. Caleb had believed him. For a year he had believed him. The door had stayed shut. Now the door was unlocked. The padlock had been pried off the handle recently, in the last week in a hurry with a screwdriver. The wood around the latch was splintered. Caleb pushed the door open. The room was a wreck. The mattress had been pulled half off the bed. The closet was emptied onto the floor. The drawers of the dresser were all open, and his mother's clothes, what was left of them, were on the rug. Wade had been searching this room. Recently. Maybe yesterday. Maybe last week. He had been looking for something. Caleb stepped inside. He went to the bed. He knelt down beside it. He reached underneath all the way to the back where the floorboards met the wall. His mother had nailed a small wooden cleat there years ago to hold a metal box flush against the wall where Wade would never look, because Wade had never bent down to look. Caleb's fingers found the cleat. The box was still there. He pulled it out. It was the size of a dictionary painted green with a small brass lock. The lock was untouched. The key was on a string around Caleb's own neck. His mother had put it there on her last clear afternoon 3 days before she died. She had said, "Do not lose this." He had not. He carried the box out into the hall. Sheriff Hayes was standing there, with his hands clasped in front of him. He did not say anything. He did not crowd. He just watched Caleb come, and he stepped back to let the boy walk into the kitchen. Caleb set the box on the kitchen table. He pulled the key out from under his shirt. He looked at the sheriff. The sheriff nodded. Caleb opened the box. Inside on top was a small white handkerchief folded once. He unfolded it. A pocket knife with a bone handle lay there. Simple and old, the blade closed. On the side of the handle, 2 letters were carved deep and plain. Caleb set the knife on the table. The sheriff's eyes went to it, but he said nothing. Underneath the knife was a stack of papers. Caleb took them out one at a time. A birth certificate. Caleb Mercer. Born April 3rd, 2015. Mother Sarah Lynn Holloway Mercer. Father Daniel Cole Mercer. Holloway. There it was, in black ink on a state form. His mother's middle name had been her maiden name, used as a middle name the way some women do when they marry, Holloway. Right there in the middle of his own birth certificate, a piece of paper Caleb had never been allowed to look at, and which Wade had been digging the house apart trying to find. Caleb set the certificate down. Underneath it was another folded paper, heavier, cream-colored. The seal of a notary on the corner. Caleb opened it. It was a will. The handwriting was his mother's. The same handwriting from the green notebook she used to write in at night. The same handwriting from the bus station letter Edith had read aloud an hour ago. Sarah's writing. Careful, tilted forward, a little shaky at the end. Caleb's eyes scanned the page. I, Sarah Lynn Holloway Mercer, being of sound mind, do hereby declare this my last will and testament. In the event of my death, I give and bequeath all my worldly possessions to my son, Caleb Daniel Mercer, born April 3rd, 2015. I do hereby specifically appoint as legal guardian of my son, Caleb Daniel Mercer, in the event of my death, prior to his 18th birthday, the following individual. Edith Marie Holloway, my mother residing at Holloway Farm, Pine Hollow, Kentucky. I do hereby specifically not appoint as guardian, and do hereby specifically exclude from any role in his care or his finances. My husband, Wade Allen Tanner. Caleb stopped reading. He looked up. Sheriff Hayes was standing at his shoulder. The sheriff was reading too. His face did not change, but his hand had come up to rest on the butt of his radio, and his other hand had closed slowly into a fist. The will was dated November 14th, 2024. His mother had written it 5 weeks before she died. She had taken it to a notary alone somehow, without Wade knowing. She had signed her full name. There were 2 witness signatures at the bottom. One was a name Caleb did not know. The other was his school nurse. She had hidden the will in this box. She had given Caleb the key. She had told him not to lose it. She had not told him what was in it, because she had not had the time, or because she had not wanted to put a target on his back, or because she had hoped all the way to the end that the cancer would let go of her at the last minute, and she would not need it. It had not let go. But she had left the paper. She had left him the paper. Caleb set the will down on the table. His hands were trembling. He pressed them flat against the wood. He said, "Sheriff." "Yes, son." He hid it. Wade hid this. He did not destroy it because he did not know it existed. But he was looking for it. He was looking for it this week. The sheriff said, "Son, I think you are right." Caleb said the court ordered today. Mr. Tanner got a judge to sign it this morning. He did not show that judge this will. Did he? The sheriff said, "No, son." He did not. Because if he had, no judge in this state would have signed that order. Caleb said then he lied to the court. The sheriff said yes. He did. There was a sound at the kitchen doorway. A scrape. A small intake of breath. Wade Tanner was standing there. He had come into the house behind them. He had been standing in the hall listening. His face had gone the white of old cheese. His mouth was open. His eyes were on the will, on the table, on the box, on the pocket knife, on the birth certificate. His eyes went last to Sheriff Hayes. Sheriff Hayes turned around very slowly. "Wade," he said. Wade Tanner said that paper is not real. Sheriff Hayes said, Mr. Tanner, take a step back and put your hands where I can see them. That paper is not real, Wade said. That paper is a fake. The boy made it. The boy made it with the old woman. They cooked it up between them. They are setting me up, Sheriff. You do not understand. You do not understand what this woman is. She is an old crazy woman. She lost her own daughter 20 years ago, and now she thinks this boy is hers. She is going to take him and the money and the land. You do not see it. You do not see what they are doing to me. Sheriff Hayes, said Wade. One more time. Step back. Hands. Wade Tanner did not step back. His hand went to his belt. There was a knife there. A folding knife longer than the one on the table. He did not pull it. He just put his hand on it. It was the gesture of a man who had run out of words. Sheriff Hayes was already moving. What happened next happened fast, and it happened slow the way these things happen. The sheriff crossed the kitchen in 2 long strides. His hand caught Wade's wrist before the knife came out of the sheath. His other hand spun Wade around and pressed his face against the doorframe. His knee came up into the small of Wade's back. The knife clattered on the linoleum. The sheriff said in a voice that had gone hard and flat, Wade Allen Tanner, you are under arrest. Caleb stood by the kitchen table with his mother's will in his hand, and he watched his stepfather be put in handcuffs. Wade was screaming now. He was screaming things that did not make sense. He was screaming about money, about the bank, about a woman named Linda, about a debt to a man in a town 3 counties over. He was crying. His face was wet. He was a small man, suddenly a much smaller man than he had ever seen before. And Caleb watched him crumple against the doorframe, and Caleb felt nothing at all. Then Caleb felt one thing. He felt sorry for him. He did not know why. The man had hit him. The man had stolen from him. The man had thrown him out into the cold with a hoe and an empty stomach. The man had tried this morning to drag him back into this rotten house under a lying piece of paper. But the man on the floor sobbing was a man whose life had ended in a kitchen. And Caleb saw that, and he was 11 years old, and his heart had not yet learned how to refuse to feel. The sheriff said, Caleb, look at me. Caleb looked. The sheriff said, son, you go on and walk out the front door now. You do not need to see any more of this. Marlene Doyle is on the porch. You go to her and you tell her this man here just confessed to falsifying a guardianship in a custody hearing in front of a county sheriff. You tell her that. Word for word. You tell her I said it. Then you go sit in my cruiser and you do not get out until I come for you. Yes, sir. Caleb walked. The hallway felt longer than it had been. His shoes made small sounds on the wood. He passed the broken padlock. He passed the bedroom where his mother had died. He passed the front room with the empty bottles and the broken porch railing. He went out the front door. Marlene Doyle was on the porch. She had heard everything. She was standing very still with one hand pressed to her chest, and her face had gone the color of paper. She looked at Caleb the way a person looks at a child she has done a wrong to. She did not try to hide it. She said, Caleb. Oh God, Caleb. I did not know. I did not know any of this. He came to my office 2 days ago. He had the death certificate. He had the guardianship papers from a year ago. He said the boy had run off. He said the woman was unstable. I checked the paperwork on file. It looked clean. I did not. I did not. Caleb said, ma'am. She stopped. Sheriff Hayes asked me to tell you something. Yes. Caleb said, he said tell you that Mr. Tanner just confessed to falsifying a guardianship in a custody hearing in front of a county sheriff. He said, "Tell you those words." Marlene Doyle closed her eyes. She said, "Caleb, will you come with me to my office tomorrow morning? Bring the will. Bring your grandmother. Bring Mr. Boyd. We are going to fix this. We are going to fix this all the way. I swear to you." "Yes, ma'am." He walked past her. He went down the porch steps. He got into the cruiser. He sat in the front seat with his mother's metal box in his lap and his mother's will folded in his hand. And he watched through the windshield as Sheriff Hayes brought Wade Tanner out of the only house he had ever lived in handcuffs, and put him into the back of a second cruiser that had pulled up while Caleb was inside, and drove him away. The night came down. Caleb closed his eyes against the upholstery of the front seat. He did not cry. He had passed the place where crying was the right answer. He just sat. He felt the box in his lap. He felt the will in his fingers. He felt for the first time in his life the weight of having a name that meant something to people other than himself. Sheriff Hayes drove him back to Holloway Farm. Edith Holloway was waiting on the porch. She came down to the gravel when she saw the headlights. The sheriff opened Caleb's door. Caleb climbed out. He walked into his grandmother's arms, and she folded him up the way a person folds a letter they have been waiting to write, and she held him there in the cold dark, and the wind moved through the cottonwoods above them. The next 2 weeks went by faster than a season ought to. The hearing for emergency custody was set for the following Wednesday. Walter Boyd filed the petition Monday morning. He attached the will. He attached the birth certificate. He attached the photographs of the bruises from the hospital. He attached a sworn affidavit from Marlene Doyle, who had sat down with him for 3 hours on Saturday and told him every word of every conversation she had had with Wade Tanner, and who was, by the time she signed her name to the affidavit, no longer working for the county. She had resigned on Friday. She had said she was going to go work for an organization in Louisville that helped children. She did not feel she had said that she had earned the right to keep her old job. The hearing took 19 minutes. Caleb wore a clean shirt Edith had ironed for him. He sat on a wooden bench beside Walter Boyd. Edith sat on his other side, her hands folded in her lap. The judge was a woman in her 60s with reading glasses on a chain. She read the petition. She read the will. She looked at the photographs. She looked at Caleb over the top of her glasses. She said, "Son, do you want to live with your grandmother?" Caleb said, "Yes, ma'am." The judge said, "Has anyone told you what to say in this courtroom today?" "No, ma'am." "Has anyone made promises to you about what you would get if you said yes today?" "No, ma'am." "Are you afraid of the woman on your right?" "No, ma'am. I love her. She fed me when I was hungry." The judge took her glasses off. She set them on the bench. She looked at Walter Boyd. She said, "Mr. Boyd." Walter Boyd said, "Yes, Your Honor." She said, "Granted." Custody temporarily transferred to Edith Marie Holloway pending full hearing in 90 days. The state will take it from here regarding the stepfather. Court is adjourned. Edith Holloway did not cry in the courtroom. She waited until they were outside on the courthouse steps. Then she sat down on the top step in her good gray dress, in front of God and the county, and she put her face in her hands. And she cried like a woman who has been holding her breath for nearly 20 years. Caleb sat down beside her. He did not say anything. He just held her hand. Wade Tanner did not go to trial. He pleaded guilty 3 months later to wire fraud and falsifying a federal benefit application and obstruction of a custody proceeding. He took a plea deal because there was nothing else for him to take. Caleb did not have to testify. The will did the testifying. Wade was sentenced to 6 years in a federal facility. The 40 acres on Bryant's Ridge were transferred into a trust with Walter Boyd as trustee to be held for Caleb until his 18th birthday. The survivor benefits were rerouted retroactive to Edith Holloway as the boy's legal guardian. 3 years of payments. Wade had not saved a dime of it. The government did not care. They garnished his future earnings for the rest of his natural life. The check that came in the mail when it came was enough to pay off the bank. Almost. There was still a gap of $4,000. Pine Hollow handled the gap. The town that had whispered into telephone lines on the worst afternoon of Edith Holloway's old life. The town that had pursed its lips at her from behind a grocery counter was the same town that filed into the White Baptist Church on the second Sunday after the hearing, and listened, and then went home and got their checkbooks. Pastor Reuben Whitman stood in the pulpit and told what he knew. He told it the way a country preacher tells a thing. Plain. No embellishment. A girl who had run away. A father who had grieved her. A mother who had waited. A grandson who had walked half a day in the cold with a hoe in his hand. A man who had sold a child for $1,200 a month. A judge who had set it right. A bank that was going to take a farm anyway. He said, "Brothers and sisters, I am not going to ask you to feel any way in particular about this. I am going to ask you something simpler. I'm going to ask you to remember that we were not as good to that family as we could have been the first time. I'm going to ask you what kind of people we want to be the second time." The bake sale raised $1,100. The auction of donated woodwork from Old Man Pruitt's barn raised another $1,500. The volunteer fire department's pancake breakfast raised $420.12. Beatrice from the grocery store, who had stared at Caleb and Edith over the bologna counter, came out one Saturday with an envelope of cash from her register tip jar and a hard look on her face that did not invite comment. The envelope had $1,000 in it. Doris from the telephone, whoever Doris was, came out the next Saturday with another $500 and would not look Edith in the eye the whole time. It was $4,520.12. It was enough. The bank took the check on a Tuesday morning. Edith stood in the lobby with Caleb's hand in hers. The bank manager, a heavy man in a brown suit, did not look any of them in the eye when he stamped the loan paid in full. Edith Holloway said, "Thank you, sir." He said, "Ma'am, you have a good day." Then she walked outside into the December sun, and she stood on the sidewalk of Pine Hollow's main street with her grandson, and she said, "Well." Caleb said, "Well." Edith said, "Do you want a Coca-Cola?" "Yes, ma'am." She bought him one at the diner. She let him drink it with a straw. She bought herself a cup of coffee and a slice of cherry pie. They sat in the booth by the window for an hour. They did not talk much. They watched the trucks go by on the main street. The waitress refilled the coffee twice and pretended she was not listening, which she was. Spring came late that year. It came the way it always comes to that part of Kentucky. The redbuds bloomed first, then the dogwoods. Then the hills along the creek went pale green and the air smelled of turned earth. And the cardinals started fighting over the feeder Edith hung off the back porch. Caleb turned 12 at the start of April. His grandmother baked him a cake. There were 2 candles on it because Edith said one for the year just gone and one for the year coming up. That was the way her own mother had done it. And Caleb did not argue. He had grown 2 inches over the winter. His face had filled out. He no longer flinched when a door slammed. He still slept sometimes with the green metal box under his bed, where he could reach it in the night. But he did not need to reach for it as often. He was working in the garden the morning of his 12th birthday. The garden was the same garden he had asked in his first week of life with his grandmother to hoe in exchange for bread. It was bigger now. They had expanded it twice over the winter. They had a row of early peas and a row of onions and a row of lettuces just coming up in their tight pale green. Edith was in the kitchen with the windows open. He could hear her singing a low, quiet hymn. the kind she had not let herself sing for a long time. Caleb was leaning on the hoe. The hoe was the same hoe. He had cleaned the handle that winter with linseed oil and a soft cloth. The wood was almost black now from the oil and the years. The two letters carved low on the handle, TH, stood out clean. Edith had told him the story of his grandfather one night by the wood stove. Thomas Edgar Holloway, a man who had cleared this land with his own hands and made it pay. A man who had carried this hoe for 50 years and had refused at the end of his life to sit down. A man whose blood was in Caleb's blood. Caleb leaned on the hoe, and he watched the morning sun come over the eastern ridge. He thought about his mother. He thought about her every day. He had begun to be able to think about her without the thinking hurting. He had begun to remember the good things slowly. The lavender soap on her hands, the hymns at night, the way she had held him on the bad days, the pocket knife in the handkerchief, the will folded in the metal box, the hoe she had carried out of this very garden when she was 17 years old, in a duffel bag on a bus, into a life that had broken her. She had never made it home, but she had pointed him here. She had given him the only map she had. Caleb's eyes blurred. He let them. He was alone in the garden. He could afford to. After a moment, he wiped his face with his sleeve. He raised the hoe. He brought it down. The blade bit the earth. A small clod of dirt turned over. A worm slid into shadow. The good, clean smell of open ground rose up at his feet. He worked. He worked the way his grandfather had worked. He worked the way his mother had worked in this same patch of earth when she was a girl. He worked the way a man works when he is making a thing that will outlive him, even if he does not yet have the words for it. Behind him, the back door of the house opened. Edith came out. She had on her gardening apron. She had a tin cup of coffee in one hand and a tin cup of milk in the other. She crossed the yard and stopped beside him. She handed him the milk. She said, "Take a break, child." "Yes, ma'am." He set the hoe down. He drank. She drank her coffee. The two of them stood there, side by side in the spring sun, in the garden behind the small white farmhouse at the end of the dirt lane. The cottonwoods moved above them. A mockingbird ran through 3 songs on the fence post and started over. Edith said your grandfather used to stand right here on a morning like this and not say a word for an hour at a time. Caleb said, "Yes, ma'am." She said, "I think he would like you." Caleb did not answer. He just leaned the hoe against his shoulder, the way a man leans a tool he has worked all his life with. And he looked across the garden and the field and the line of cottonwoods to the road where a little less than 6 months ago, a hungry boy had walked alone with the sun setting at his back. He said, "Ma'am, yes, I came up that road with nothing but this hoe." "I know you did." He turned the hoe in his hand. The 2 letters TH caught the morning light. He said, "I came home with a name carved into it." Edith Holloway did not answer that. She put her hand on his shoulder. She left it there. The hand was old, and it was steady, and it was warm through his shirt. The mockingbird started a 4th song. After a while, Edith squeezed his shoulder once and turned and walked back across the yard to the kitchen door. The screen swung closed behind her with a small, soft sound. Caleb stood alone for 1 more minute. He looked across the garden at the road. The road was empty. The road had been empty for a long time now. He had no need of it anymore. He picked up the hoe. He set its blade against the earth. He went back to work. The morning rose up over the hills of Pine Hollow County, and the sun warmed the wood of the handle in his hands. And the boy in the garden and the small white farmhouse at the end of the dirt lane went on with the business of being themselves. The hoe fit his hands the way it had fit his mother's and his grandfather's before her. It would fit them for a long time. That was enough. That was more than enough.